homeschool moms, because we're not.
Okay.
No one's paying us.
No one's paying us? Is there an option to get paid?
No.
No? No option to get paid.
I don't know who would pay us to homeschool our kids.
Wouldn't that be great if we got paid to homeschool our children? How much money do you think we'd make? We probably shouldn't think about it. Okay, moving on. Hey,
this level of education.
Does it depend on your level of education or what you can accomplish?
Like how well you can multitask?
Yeah, and how many things you can get done. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. It's Jen Chia here with Homeschool Iowa and Tamara Poole, and we were chatting about homeschooling, moms, stuff like that, high school, and Tamara was sharing with me some information about homeschooling high school. And that's kind of an area that a lot of moms are kind of scared about. And Tamara, what was your experience like, or some things that you learned?
Okay, so my experience, I'm still in it. So I always hesitate because it's, Annie is my youngest and she's 17. She's a senior this year and she's wonderful and beautiful and all those perfect things about being a girl. But, she's not done yet. So
Almost there. You're almost at the
I'm almost there. But I can say my kids love me, which was a goal. I think one of the first things, we talked about this a little bit, is defining what success means to our family.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so before I say, well, hey, everything's hunky-dory and peachy keen, I need to say, well, this is kind of what I was going for. So am I meeting the goals or the things that I wanted to see happen? And I think for me, it was about, having certain expectations and setting certain goals along the way, but understanding that these are real people that I'm dealing with, and I'm a real person,
right.
And I'm still in process. I'm going to be in process until the day I come to my demise, and so understanding that about myself means I'm going to be growing and changing as I go and giving myself the grace to do that, but my children as well, and so I'm going to learn about them as we're growing, and so being a student of my children in that respect, like I'm learning who they are as they become who they are, and the irony of that is I'm supposed to somehow guide them, and so it calls for a lot of I would say being on your knees, but literally it's like just praying all the time. Mm-hmm. So while I'm on my feet and while I'm driving and all the time, just like, oh dear Jesus, please, I don't know what to do here, and so constantly seeking God's wisdom during that time. But it's so incredibly rewarding. My kids are normal as far as I know. As far as, if you know them, they're not. But I think as far as any family goes, you've just got certain quirks and eccentricities, and some kids do this and some kids don't do that. And one of my children had an especially difficult time with just focus, and very bright, but the academics, the bookwork just became so difficult for this child. And he's in his sophomore year of college now, and 1 week in, he comes to me and he said, I think I got this year. And last year he did okay, but he got so sick twice. Math, physically ill. Math was still a big deal. That was like not happening very well. And just the struggle of it all. And he said, I think this is going to be a really good year. And he thanked me a lot last year too, but just to actually have your child take the time to step aside and say, you know what, you did a really good job, because I don't think I could manage all the things I'm managing, this job, these internships, all my classes, still serving at the church. He's like, I don't think I could do all this if you didn't teach me how to learn and give me that desire.
Right.
And he says, because now he is aware of his academic struggles and he has to own them. It's not me. Mm-hmm. So I had to homeschool through that all the way through, which is something that made it very difficult. But now he has to own that. And his willingness to actually own that has been beautiful to see. Mm-hmm. And for him to actually come back and say thanks.
You're like, I didn't screw up completely.
I know. And he still likes me. And so I don't want to candy coat it. It's hard to homeschool through high school.
What do you think is the hardest thing about homeschooling through high school, or what advice would you give to a mom who's kind of got a middle schooler and she's approaching those high school years?
I think one of the most difficult things is I think it's our culture. There's a few things that we struggle with as parents. Number one, I think our culture just expects kids to be very independent and yet not at that age. Like this is when they should be able to spread their wings and go do all these different kinds of things, and yet not,
Right. There's a lot of restrictions.
There's a lot of restrictions still, but yet as a homeschool parent, we still have so many different things we're wrestling with those children,
right.
And I think this is very messy. It's a very humbling, somewhat humiliating time, and I think
for the parent or the kids or both.
For both. If we think back to when we were personally in middle school, those are not my favorite years of existence.
Right. Yes.
And
I think we can all testify to that.
And I don't think my children, when they look back, and they see I homeschooled all the way through, but those years were difficult, and they weren't necessarily fun. As many beautiful memories as I tried to give them, those were really difficult years, and it's very difficult for the child, but it's also difficult for the parent, because it's during that time when, instead of pushing them away and saying you need to do everything on your own, or you need to be independent, or we actually need to hold them closer.
Interesting.
And embrace them and get messy with them. This is a time when they're middle school and into high school. This is a time of wrestling with their identity, wrestling with who they are in Christ, and owning their own faith, not just leaning on their parents' faith. They have to question everything during this time, because they're suddenly aware that things aren't black and white. There's a whole spectrum of color out there, and what am I supposed to do with it? That can be overwhelming, especially when the hormones are involved too.
Sure.
And their whole body's changing, and they're tripping over themselves when they didn't used to do that. They're smelling funky, and
yeah,
I mean,
we got that.
So many different things are happening in their lives, and it's so difficult. And as overwhelming as it is for them, I think for us, we don't want to relive it. It's hard to remember, right?
It puts you back to when you were a kid. It puts us back,
because we grew past it, but some of us, we never really
dealt with it
or grew up. Like, one of my struggles was I didn't know how to handle conflict. And so middle school is all about conflict and questioning. And I'm like, just do the right thing because Jesus says to do, And yet, they're coming at me with, well, what did Jesus really say about that? And they're genuinely interested. They're not saying, well,
Right.
And I have to be discerning about when they're doing this and when they're actually questioning. But most of the time it was a genuine question. And I have to be willing to sit down and wrestle through that, not just for them, but for myself.
So, Tamara, what I am hearing you say is that, kind of our society pushes kids out in those years. And you're saying we need to bring them in actually closer. And that's not necessarily a beautiful, happy, cheery time, but it's a struggle, and it's a wrestling through those issues that they're encountering, and then even wrestling through some of your own past and your parenting mistakes, and humbling yourself before the Lord.
Yes.
And is that where you see the struggle through high school really being, versus maybe trying to figure out how to teach chemistry or something?
Goodness, no. It's not about how to teach chemistry or whether or not I can find the right trigonometry book, or, oh my goodness, my kid's interested in debate. What I have found is that the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. And if he is guiding my child in a certain direction, he has always provided the means for that.
Okay.
I need to open my eyes to see where he's guiding and directing and how he's providing those means. And I need to be content with the means he's providing. For example, with piano lessons, one of the things about our family is that we're musical, and I really felt prompted from the beginning that I wanted to dedicate to my children that I will give you piano lessons all the way through high school, as far as I'm able to do that. And the Lord provided. Now, I had friends who noticed the talent in some of my children, and were like, you need to get them a different piano teacher, or you need to get them into...
Oh, interesting.
And I knew our budget wasn't there. This is what we could manage. This is, we were a one-car family. It's not like I can be taking kids to Ames or Indianola or
So they're saying your kids are really amazing talent. You need to take them somewhere because you can't do it enough, right?
Right. Well, I wasn't giving them piano lessons, but I mean, the person I was paying.
I thought you were teaching your children.
No.
I'm like,
I was teaching them, how to read and do math and tie their shoes and go to the bathroom, but I didn't teach them piano.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm following you now. But the Lord provided what you needed at the right time. The Lord provided,
exactly, and then the doors began opening for other resources as that was needed. Now, does that mean that whole time I was content and I was settled in my heart? No, I was in anxiety. I was stressing out before the Lord, which is not appropriate, but that was what I was doing. And in His time, He opened those doors because that was when those doors needed to be opened. And all along the way, so He consistently provided what they needed to get where they needed to be, but I didn't just sit around and wait. I was actively involved in their lives. I was pursuing things. I was bringing it to the Lord and saying, which door do you want me to go through? And then I was knocking on doors. I wasn't just standing in the hallway looking at them. So, I tried to balance that, but there's a huge amount of just learning to trust the Lord in that time too, because there's so many options and we can get too busy and have too many things going on too.
That makes a lot of sense. Did you have a mentor, an older homeschooling mom who had gone through the high school years when you were going through them that you went to, or any resources or anything that pops in your mind? I
think when we're homeschooling through middle school and high school, that is when it's essential to have community.
Okay.
Not just, say, one mentor, because one person's not going to meet all my needs when it comes to that, because my child, each one of them is different. And so I sought out a number of different mentors for different things. So musically, I had different people I would go to for advice. Emotionally, like when I'm dealing with learning struggles, I had certain people I went to for advice and I trusted. Because other people, as wonderful as they are, I remember going to a mom and kind of testing the waters, so to speak, to bare my soul a little bit about one of the struggles I had with one of my children, because they really struggled socially. And this mother, in all her grace and wisdom, didn't quite hear what I was saying. And she told me that all it takes is consistent parenting and everything will be fine. And if I would just consistently parent this child, these social issues would go away. And
so maybe her advice would have not necessarily been wrong, but it didn't fit your situation.
No, it didn't fit my situation, and of course she, from her limited perspective, only understood her sphere of what she had encountered and didn't understand my definition of what had been consistent parenting and how it was applying in this child's life. So I found other people, and that's where church friends, whether or not they're homeschooling, pastors, support groups, and that's where online communities are helpful too. Finding specific groups that deal with whether it's sensory issues or ADHD or social anxiety, being able to find those people that, and then, filter what they say through God's truth. The truth of God's word, so that we can support our kids well. So it's about the community, also because this is a time, I needed other parents that understood what it was like to be a homeschool mom, because especially at this age, because like I said, it is messy and we're wrestling, and my kids are out there in the real world making real mistakes at this time, and sometimes because they're questioning. A lot of us in Christians and in homeschool, we go for something called first-time obedience when they're younger. We really want our kids to obey, and they need to for safety and just to obey the Lord and honor their parents. When we get to the middle school and high school years, I have to train them to listen to God on their own, to learn to answer, to ask the right questions and find truth on their own, which means that I can't always just dictate everything through a patriarchal or matriarchal system of authority. I need to step back a little bit and be more of a coach and an influencer and get them out there testing the waters.
That kind of goes a little messy.
That gets really messy. And so I think it's really important to have fellow parents that are struggling with this because they understand. They don't excuse it. They don't excuse bad behavior, but they're not going to call your kid out or you out for everything. They're going to understand that was
child's learning to go on
the
its own.
child's learning, right, and to support you in that and to have your back. It's also so important, this community, is because you have each other's back. So I have a friend who, when my kiddo got on Instagram,
Okay.
he's on Instagram, she texts me, "Did you see this picture of your kiddo on Instagram?" And I was like, "Oh my word, no, what is he thinking?" And
Right.
and she goes, "I thought you should see it." You know, so I go to my kid and I said, "What are you thinking?"
He wasn't thinking.
And he wasn't thinking. And he's like, "What?" And he still wasn't thinking. He's like, "Nothing wrong with it." I said, "Okay, so who sees this?
Right.
And what might they think about you if they see this?" He's like, "Oh my goodness." Takes it down.
Yep.
But all he was doing was he was lifting weights in his room, took a picture of him in the mirror like boys do, you know, with the guns.
Right.
But the way the picture was, it looked as if he didn't have any pants on.
Okay. Oh dear.
Because his shorts, you know, because the way he cropped it and everything. And
it just looks wrong.
it just didn't look right. And
right,
as soon as he saw that, he realized, but it took my friend
to let me
know
and to support you in that parenting role.
Exactly.
Yeah, she knew what you would want with your children.
Exactly. And she was not like, "Oh my word," calling her friends and saying, "Did you see what
Did you see what Tamara's kid did?" And
right, our youth pastor's wife's son. I mean,
let's add all the labels.
Let's add all the labels on this.
Yeah.
The pastor's kid is posting this on Instagram. So you need community.
Good friends.
Yes,
Okay, got it. We need good friends
that have your back. Not only for things like that, but also because when your kids are at their house, like so when her kids are at my house or my kids are at her house or our kids are out together, we have each other's back on all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
You know, it comes down to the simplest things, like when one of my kids said, "Oh, I don't have to wear a bike helmet because none of my friends wear bike helmets." You know, and I'm like,
actually, that's not true.
Yeah,
I know so makes her kids
wear
do
bike
that.
helmets. Oh, no. I'm like, "Oh, just wait, baby. I got this." No! I'm like, no. I'm going to make sure because I want to be a good mom. I don't want to be that mom. And so, you know, I'm calling every single one of them.
We've had a few of those.
Yeah, and it was great because it was just like the scene from A Christmas Story, because you can hear in the background where they're like, you know, to their kids, like, bike helmet. And then, of course, the next time my son goes to their house, it's like, we had to wear our helmets. It's like, good, you had to wear your helmets.
And that's a small issue of safety, and then as they grow out into teens, those issues of safety, and they need that community support from their friends that also hold to those safety standards as they explore further on their own.
Yes, and the other parents are looking out for each other and the kids because we love each other and we love each other's kids. We want our kids to succeed, to know the Lord. And I want, if my kid's really struggling with something, say with me, I want him to know he can trust his friend's mom.
Right.
You know, she's a great resource. Go to her.
She has our same values.
Right.
Yeah.
I want them to know that Pastor so-and-so knows about our family, and you can go to this pastor and you can talk to him. And we're all on the same page because the teenagers need to know that their parents aren't insane. And so they're testing.
And all evidence says contrary, right?
Yes, they have to test the waters. And so if we have this community going.
Right. And
that's like a commune.
You're not the only, no, I understand. You're not the only kid that's parent thinks this way or that.
Exactly.
Tamara, you spoke on something that I think a lot of homeschoolers question, and it's always the big issue. Can you even guess what it is? What about socialization? You mentioned socialization. You mentioned having a problem. Would you just take a couple minutes and elaborate on that for us? And do you have any advice or ideas around that? Because I know it's one that comes up over and over and over again.
It does. I only have 3 children, so I can only speak from my 3 kids' experience. I've also, my husband and I had been on staff at churches, until just 3 years ago, working with families and youth. So I have that experience and knowledge too, as far as the commonality of what we all struggle with. But with my 3 children, I'm kind of across the spectrum when it comes to socialization. My oldest would prefer to live in his head and not have to socialize. And so from the very beginning, as soon as we realized this about him, and this blossomed mostly in middle school.
Okay.
When he was younger, he played very well with other children and that was not a thing. But when we got to middle school, his dearest, closest friend died of cancer.
Oh.
And
oh wow.
Yes. And he just wasn't connecting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we realized it wasn't just about his dearest, closest friend. It was that he really just does live in his head and was settling in there.
Gotcha.
And I needed to find a community that was academically inclined for him, because that's how he connected with people.
Okay.
At church, he connected through Bible quiz. He connected through the Ranger program, like actually doing intellectual or project-based things. That was how he connected with people.
Okay.
And so the social stuff, like hanging out, was not going to...
Small talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not going to work. And so I needed to find that and prayed, and the Lord opened some doors for us. Again. He opened it. And I've been praying, I have to be honest, I've been praying for 2 years.
Okay.
I've been praying for 2 years. And when it happened, though, this is the beauty of it, I knew that was my answer. Because I had been very specifically looking with my eyes wide open, waiting on the Lord. And when it happened, I knew that that's what we were supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that it was for him. And it was beautiful. And he even told me when he went off to college, he's like, I don't know where I would have been if not for that. And because that gave him that group of people consistently to connect with and have discussions that were on an intellectual level. And God put that group together, and it fit my son's personality so well. Now, my second son is super social.
Sure, and you're like having to pull him down a little bit.
Right, and so for him, it's more, okay, this is how, well, I guess I should back up. For my oldest, there was also that idea of, you have a gift of being extremely intelligent. And so that means you have to learn to take what you know and put it in words that other people understand. And owning the responsibility of that intelligence, and understanding that the calling God has on your life is to be kind and to be gracious, not to patronize, not to be frustrated or exasperated.
Sure.
There's I don't know where the chapter is, but in Nathaniel Bowditch, Carry On Mr. Bowditch, and it's a true story, he's also like that.
Okay.
And his friend tells him, you have to stop stumbling over other people's ignorance. And what she meant was, it's almost like he was losing his Jesus because these people couldn't catch on as quickly as he needed them to catch on. His brain was going so fast, he was getting mad at other people.
Gotcha.
Once he took that to heart, he was the one that was an advocate for the underdog and trained and taught so many sailors how to sail, because he turned that around.
What's the name of the book?
Carry On, Mr. Bowditch. It's a Newbery Award-winning children's book. Like, it's just a chapter book, paperback. You can find it pretty much anywhere. But it was, and because I had that nugget for my oldest, I kept going back to that. Like, Jesus calls us to love our fellow man, and this is your gift. I don't know what you're going to do with it or what he's going to help you with in this or how he's going to work through you, but you have to love others this way. This is how you love other people. And he's learned that. So the second one, yeah. Go ahead.
Well, that is amazing. No, that's good. I appreciate that, Tamara. I feel like you could impart your parenting wisdom on us all day long, and I'm gonna cut our video off for now. I'd like to invite you guys to leave a comment in the comments section. If you have a thought about something Tamara shared, a question for her, go ahead and drop a comment in our comment box, and then we can kind of keep things going and keep going back and forth. And I don't know if Tamara wants to give out a personal phone number for advice. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm still homeschooling.
I'm kidding. But we have a rich community of veteran homeschooling moms here in our Homeschool Iowa discussion group, in our regional rep groups, and in other places of Homeschool Iowa resources. And those moms are wanting to reach out to you to help you to answer your questions. And Tamara is one of them. You might spot her around some of our events like conference or Capital Day and some of the things that you might show up to. Tamara, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. I started taking notes, and then I might just go back and rewatch the video and take some more notes. And we're going to be embarking on that high school time frame soon. And so I have some things to think about off of our conversation and pray about, and I really appreciate that.
Thanks.
So
I still have plenty to think about and pray about myself.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your knowledge. Thanks so much.
Thanks.